this thing on? You ready? All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in for part 2 of Pinewood Derby Speed. Part 2. All right, we're going to talk about some more science of building a fast Pinewood Derby car today. So, first part, we talked about my history with the Pinewood Derby, history with the Cub Scouts. We talked about shaping your block of wood, studying your rules. The thing I want to hit on today is it's got to be fun. If the kids aren't having fun, then it's not worth it. So the kids have to be involved in the project. They have to be having fun. And it's a learning process for them, especially, they're a tiger cub. Okay, maybe you're going to do a lot of the work, but as you go along, and by the time they're a wee blue too, they should be pretty much building most of their entire car. So that's my little rant for the moment about fun. So we've got our block of wood built. We talked in our first segment. We cut out our axle slots. We shaped our block of wood. We are ready to move on. We decorated. We talked about that. We talked about paint. We talked about hydro dip. So what we've got now is we're going to talk about our axles. We're going to talk about weight. So axles and wheels, that's a big thing in the Cub Scout rules. When it comes to the wheels, the BSA wheels are actually pretty darn good wheels. They don't really need any kind of work done to them. And your rules are going to be very, very specific on what can and can't be done to the wheels. There's not a lot you can do to them. You can do stuff to the axles. You can do a little bit to the wheels, but you got to watch yourself that you're not breaking any rules. Now, when it comes to something like an Awana race, their wheels are not as good. And in fact, they do have their own wheels. So when we've done Awana races, the rules pretty well crossed over from Cub Scouts to Awana. We would usually build a new car or a car that had never been raced in Awana before. Maybe it was used in a Cub Scout race, but a lot of times we're going to build a new car. But one of our differences was we had to use Awana wheels instead of Cub Scout wheels, and you could tell the difference in the build quality. So I think what happened was people were really cheating over the years with wheels and doing things to them. So I think BSA really tightened up their manufacturing specs on their wheels and made sure that their wheels were really good quality right out of the box. So there's a little bit you can do. I'm not going to hit much on the wheels, but we'll talk about it a little bit. I do want to talk about axles though. So when you get these axles and they're new out of your box, this one I think's already been worked on a little bit, but I don't think it's going to show up so much. There's a lot of times there's going to be some casting flange on the underside of the nail head. There's going to be a little bit of casting flash there, and then there might be some machining marks on the edges of the axle. So you're allowed to grind those things out. You're allowed to polish your axles. Some rules will allow you to bend them. Now, bending is a pretty precise science. It's not something I've chosen to mess with because I feel like there's so much error possible that it's almost more harm than good to mess with bending axles. Now, I have, and we'll talk about this, of positioning our axles differently on the car, but bending them isn't something I wanted to get into personally. So what you want to do first, you get your axle, you want to give it an inspection, see how much work it actually needs. They're not bad, but a lot of time they can usually use some kind of work. So you've got different methods you can use. I picked up one of these sets. It's called Pine Car Micro Polishing System. I got it at my local Ace Hardware, and it fit my needs. It did everything I wanted to do. It came with a magnifying glass and a special file. So the file's got a little handle on it, and then it's triangular shaped. So it's got a couple different flat edges. And what you do is you mount up your axle in a drill. Then it's just a matter of turning on the drill, and you've got your file. And, turn the other way. So it's a matter of running the drill and filing out any kind of casting flange or machining marks. You're going to want to do it on the underside of the head try to show that. Do it on the underside of the head, and then alongside the shaft as well. And it's a file, so it's only going to get it so smooth, but you're mainly looking to get the bulk out. If you've got any kind of rough edges, the casting flange is huge. Let's get rid of that totally. So the next step, after you've gone through and you've gotten the big stuff off of the axle, now you want to start your polishing process. So this particular kit, it came with some sandpaper. It came with actually 7 different sheets of sandpaper. I've used them up, so it's actually gone. But it comes with 400, 600, 800, 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, and 2,000 grit sandpaper. And if you don't know anything about sandpaper, the bigger the grit is, the coarser the sandpaper is going to be. For example, that ceramic belt I showed on the belt sander earlier, that's probably like a 30 or a 40 grit. So that's like very aggressive, very abrasive, versus this kit that comes with up to 2,000 grit sandpaper. Heck, you're getting down to where just like a piece of paper, like writing paper, you're getting down to that fine of polishing. So what you do is, like I said, I used up my sandpaper already, so I don't have any. I wasn't going to buy a new kit just to make this video. But you're going to cut out strips of sandpaper, and you're going to do it of your 400, I don't know what are there, 400, 600, 800. And what I found useful, because when you're dealing with 7 different sheets of sandpaper and you're making all these different strips, it's easy to kind of forget which one is which. So I used the pen and I just wrote on the back of each strip, I wrote 400 and then 600, 800. So I had each strip marked and I knew what they were before I got started. So then what you do, you take your sandpaper and you're going to put it on your axle. Then you're just going to spin the drill. And the whole idea is you're going to polish the axle. So you're going to start with your coarsest sandpaper and work it all the way up to your most, your smoothest sandpaper, your least coarse. And I found that one strip of sandpaper could do a bunch of axles, because you don't necessarily need to use just the middle. You can move it a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and you can just use one strip for a bunch of different axles, and you get them all so they really are polished, nice and shiny, smooth. It's a really important part of building a fast car. I can give you an example. This old car from the 80s, look at that wheel. These wheels barely move. Like this thing, I don't know, today it would make it down the track. Now these wheels, they don't have any graphite on them right now. It hasn't been touched in a year since we last raced. Look at those things spin. That really comes down to the polish and the quality of what you're doing. They're just still spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. Polishing your axles makes a big, big, big difference. Okay, before we finish up our discussion on axles, we're going to talk about the different theories of how many wheels should be on the track versus not. There's theories of putting 3 wheels on the track versus 4 wheels on the track, and you're going to do that with your axles. There's theories of bending your axles and purposely making your car steer into the guide rail that goes down the middle. They call it rail riding. Personally, I don't see the benefit. I feel like that would cause a lot of added friction, and friction is your enemy when you're building a Pinewood Derby car. You also don't want your car, though, to be jiggling back and forth across it. We talked earlier about a stable car is a fast car. So really it comes down to your test day and what you're gonna do when you go to testing. And there's theories of, so 3 wheels on the track versus 4 wheels. This car has 4 wheels touching. This car only has 3 wheels touching. And all we did to accomplish that was when we inserted the one axle, we had it lifted up a little bit. So it's just angled, and the other 3 wheels are down. So one theory is that you have 3 wheels on the track, that there's going to be less friction on the axles and on the wheels and on the body of the car, because you're only going to have friction in 3 points instead of 4 points. But then there's another theory of you spread out that friction to 4 points versus 3 points. And, you know, it's kind of a give and take. You want more friction in 3 places or a little less friction, but in 4 places. And really, to me, it's going to come down to your testing day. I know our Cub Scout pack and our Awana, we would have a night a couple days before the actual race where you could go in and you could test out your car and just experiment with different things. If you want to try out your weight placement, your wheel positioning, 3 wheels down, 4 wheels down. But again, I got to advise you to follow your rules. Some organizations might say you have to have 4 wheels down. Some might say only 3. Part of that comes down to build quality. And if you're not a good builder and just slapping some car together, it might actually be hard to get all 4 wheels to touch the track evenly, or even to have all 4 wheels down, because you've got 4 different axles pushing into the block of wood, and depending upon how you might have cut your grooves or used the grooves that came with the block of wood, you might have issues with getting all 4 wheels to touch evenly, in which case 3 is fine. Now, that being said, if I was going to use 3, which we have, this car it won the sibling class and it dominated Awana, and it had 3 wheels down. If I'm going to have 3 though, I'm definitely going to have 2 in the back, and I'm going to have 1 up front lifted. This car in testing, it turned out that it was faster with 3 wheels than with 4 touching the track, so that's how we did it. Went with that, and it won. Last thing I'm going to touch on with axles is how we're going to install our axles. So we're going to talk about installing our axles. So you're really going to want these to not be, you don't want to hammer them in. You don't want to risk breaking your wood. This wood can be pretty unforgiving. I've had it splinter and break and so on. And you're going to need to be taking your wheels on and off and on and off and on and off to lube them and test them and move them around and stuff like that. So really, you want to make sure that when you cut your groove, that it's wide enough, that these axles should be able to just push in with your thumb. So the way I like to do it is just put the axle through the wheel and then hold it with my thumb so I can just push it in. So it should be just that hard. You shouldn't have to hammer these things down. Now, we talked in the first segment about using friction modifiers if your rules allow it. So I know in our Cub Scout district, the old rules were there was no friction modifiers allowed on the side of your car or where the wheels contacted the car. Awana doesn't have any such rules, which makes it legal. If it's not prohibited, then it's legal. So once it became legal with Cub Scouts and it was already legal with Awana, we picked up some Teflon tape, got it on Amazon, pretty cheap. Stuff works great. It's smooth as can be, especially when you get some graphite on it. So what we do is just cut a strip of this stuff off. You really only need it to be about as long as your wheel is the width of your wheel. Well, not the width of your wheel, but you really only need it to be about as long as your wheel is long. Meaning like this. So when your wheel is going to contact the side of the car, if it does, or the axle is the main part that's going to contact the car. If your wheel is touching the side of your car, your axle probably isn't in there very straight. But like I said, you only need your tape to be about that long. And you're just going to, this is a double-sided, or not a double-sided tape, but it's got an adhesive backing on it. So we're just going to peel that off. Then all I do is I line it up on the bottom edge of the car, or even stick it out a little bit further so it sticks down below the bottom edge of the car. Then I put my axle through my wheel. Then I simply poke it through. The tape should be easy enough that you can just poke right through it. So what you wanted to do was create a dent in the tape where it pushes inward. You don't want it sticking out. You don't want to create any kind of friction. So just poking it through gives it a nice clean break. The point, your axle should be nice and pointed, and it gives you a nice smooth surface for your wheel to roll up against, if it does at all. So that's what I've got on axles and axle installation for now. We'll talk a little bit about wheels. So the BSA rules allow you to just look for any imperfections in the wheel. If there's any kind of like casting or leftover manufacturing marks on the wheel, you can sand them out. And all you really want to do is just use a piece of sandpaper and just go along. I like to scuff them up just a little bit. You can't do anything too extreme with the wheels. You're not allowed to cover them up. You're not allowed to sand out the insides of the wheels when it comes to Cub Scout rules. Now, if you're in some other organization, maybe it's the Wild West, you can do anything you want. Cub Scout rules, you got to leave the wheels pretty well alone. But like I was saying in our earlier segment, the Cub Scout wheels, BSA wheels, they're already in really good shape right out of the box. There's not a whole lot to do to them. So I just like to look them over, make sure that if there's any imperfections, I sand them off. I like to give them a little bit of scuff on what would be the tread surface. And then one of the final things I like to do when it comes to the wheels is I like to polish the inside of the axle. And the way I do that, I couldn't find a pipe cleaner, but the way I do it is I use a pipe cleaner and I just chalk it up inside the drill. And I put a little bit of toothpaste on. You could use any kind of, I guess, car wax or something with just a little bit of abrasion to it, but not a lot. So toothpaste actually works great. I put a little bit of toothpaste on a pipe cleaner. I feed it through the wheel and then just turn the drill on. And I run the wheel back and forth on the pipe cleaner a little bit because I want to just polish the inside, smooth that out in case there's any imperfections in there, make the inside of my wheel real nice and smooth without breaking any of the rules for the wheels. All right, so that is the end of our discussion for axles and wheels. So if you like our content, we appreciate it. Give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscribe. Appreciate you watching. Tune in for our next installment of Pinewood Derby Speed. Thank you.